You want to know the strangest thing about that morning? It started so ordinary that I almost didn't go out at all. I've told this story maybe 40 times now. To my daughter, to the two officers who took my statement, to a woman at church who didn't believe a word of it. And every single time, I start in the same place, with the tea going cold in my hand and a man in a gray tracksuit laughing at a soldier who wouldn't look at him. I still don't know that man's name. The one in the tracksuit, I mean. But I know the soldier's name now. Everybody does. And I promise you, by the time I'm finished, you'll understand why I can't drink my morning tea without thinking of him. Let me take you back. It was a Tuesday in early autumn, the kind of London morning where the sky can't decide what it wants to be. Gray one minute, a weak little bit of gold pushing through the next. There'd been rain overnight, so the pavements were still dark and slick, and the air had that clean, cold smell it gets after a wash. You know the smell. Wet stone and leaves and somebody's coffee from 3 doors down. I run a little cart. Well, I ran a little cart. Coffee, tea, a few pastries wrapped in paper, nothing fancy. I set up most mornings on the corner near the park where the tourists come off the coaches and the office people cut through on their way in. I've done it 11 years. My knees know that corner better than they know my own hallway. That corner sits close to one of the ceremonial posts. There's a soldier stationed there some mornings, one of the guards in the tall bearskin cap and the red tunic, standing at a box, still as anything. Tourists love him. They line up. They pose. They wave hands in front of his face like he's a machine that might switch on. He never moves. That's the whole point of him, see? He's not there to entertain. He's there to stand. I'd nod at him most mornings. Never expected a nod back and never got one. But I'd nod anyway. Felt rude not to. He was a person under all that, even if the tourists forgot it. That Tuesday the coaches came early. 2 of them, big shiny things, hissing as they pulled in. Out spilled maybe 60, 70 people. Cameras up before their feet even touched the ground. School groups, couples, a few older folks with those little folding walking sticks. The usual river of humanity, all pointing the same way. And in among them, the man in the gray tracksuit. I noticed him because he was loud. That's the honest truth. You get a feel, doing what I do, for the ones who are going to be trouble. It's not the way they dress. It's the volume. This fella had the volume turned all the way up before 9 in the morning. He was big, not fat, big, broad across the shoulders, thick through the neck, the kind of build that fills a doorway. He had a shaved head going a bit pink in the cold, and a phone in his hand he kept lifting up and talking into like the whole park needed to hear. 2 mates hung off him, laughing at everything he said before he'd finished saying it. Look at this, he was going, waving at the guard. Look at I am standing there like a lemon. What's he even for? His mates laughed. I remember pouring a tea for a woman in a yellow raincoat and watching over the lid as the big man walked right up to the rope near the guard's post, close as the rope would let him. Then closer, leaning over it. "Oi," he said, right in the guard's face. "Oi, you alive in there, mate?" The guard didn't move. Course he didn't. I've seen 1,000 tourists try this. They think it's clever. They think they're the first person ever to shout boo at a man who's been trained to stand through wind, rain, insult, and idiocy without so much as a blink. The guard just kept his eyes forward, chin level, rifle at his side, breathing so slow you couldn't even see it. But this fella, he didn't laugh it off and move on like the others do. That's what made my stomach turn a bit. He stayed. Something in him needed the guard to react, needed to win. "He's not real," the big man announced to his mates, loud enough that a few tourists turned. "He's a dummy, waxwork. They stick a fake one out when the real ones are having their tea." He grinned around at his little audience. "Watch." And that's when he ducked under the rope. The whole corner went quiet in a way that's hard to describe. Not silent, the traffic was still there, the pigeons, somebody's kid crying somewhere. But the people went quiet. That group of tourists, all of them, dropped their voices at the same moment like somebody had turned a dial. because everybody knew the second his trainer crossed under that rope that a line had been stepped over that isn't supposed to be stepped over. The guard's eyes shifted, just once, just a flick down and to the side, then straight ahead again. If you weren't watching close, you'd have missed it, but I was watching close. He'd clocked the man. He knew exactly where he was. The big man walked a slow circle round him, hands out, playing to the crowd. "See, nothing. He can't touch me. They can't do nothing, these lot. It's all for show." He tapped the side of his own head, grinning. "It's a costume, innit? Bloke inside's probably half asleep." One of his mates said, half nervous, "Come on, leave it. There's guards for a reason." "There's guards for tourists," the big man cut him off. "That's what he's for, selfies." He turned back to the soldier. "Aren't ya? Nod if you can hear me. Go on, one little nod." "Nothing." And I could see it happening, the way you can see a glass going over the edge of a table before it falls. This man wasn't going to stop until he got something. A flinch, a word, anything. He needed the guard to be less than he was, because if the guard could just stand there calm, taking it, then maybe the loud man was the small one and something in him couldn't bear that. So he reached out, and he grabbed the guard's arm. I heard a woman gasp, the one in the yellow raincoat next to my cart. Her hand went to her mouth. He didn't just touch him. He gripped, wrapped that big hand right around the guard's forearm over the red tunic, and I saw the fabric bunch. I saw the man's knuckles go white. He squeezed hard, leaning his weight into it, trying to make the guard buckle, trying to prove to his mates, to the crowd, to himself, that there was nothing behind the uniform but an ordinary bloke who'd fold like anyone else. "See," he said, teeth gritted, squeezing. "Nothing, feel that, he's not even." And here's the part I've told 40 times, and it still gives me the same feeling in my chest. The guard didn't fold. The guard didn't wince, didn't pull away, didn't shout, didn't shove, didn't do a single thing you'd expect a man to do when another man has a fist locked around his arm in front of a laughing crowd. He just stood, eyes forward, perfectly level, as if the hand crushing his arm was no more to him than a leaf that had landed there. I've thought about that a lot since, what it must take, because I'll tell you, if a stranger grabbed my arm like that, I'd have jumped a mile or swung at him or at the very least yelped. It's instinct. It's the oldest instinct there is. Somebody hurts you, you react. He didn't react. He trained the react clean out of himself. Every ounce of him was pouring into one single thing: hold the post, hold the line, don't give him what he wants, and it was working. And you could see the big man getting more and more wound up, because the harder he squeezed, the more nothing he got back. "Fake," he spat, though his voice had gone a bit funny now, less sure. "Fake as anything." His mate touched his shoulder. Mate, someone's filming, come on." That got through. The big man let go, shoved the arm away as he did it, a last little dig, and stepped back under the rope with his hands up, laughing again, that too loud laugh. "Waxwork," he called back over his shoulder. "Told ya." And the guard, I watched him, the guard flexed his fingers. Once. Just his hand down at his side, opening and closing where the blood must have been coming back into it. That was all. Then he was still again, chin level, eyes on the middle distance, as if nothing at all had happened. I remember thinking, "Son, whoever you are, I hope somebody at home knows what you just did." I didn't know yet that in about 11 minutes, the whole of that corner was going to change forever, and that same young man was going to do something that made a squeezed arm look like nothing at all. Let me tell you about those 11 minutes, because they mattered, even though nobody knew it. The tourists drifted off. That's the thing about a scene, it burns hot and then it's gone. The big man and his mates wandered off toward the park gates, still laughing, already telling the story their own way. A few people who'd watched shook their heads. The woman in the yellow raincoat said to me, "Quiet, that poor lad." The nerve of some people, and I agreed with her, and she took her tea and went. The corner settled back into its ordinary rhythm. A traffic warden came past. A man walked 3 little dogs on 3 leads all tangled together. Somewhere a busker was setting up, tuning a guitar, playing the same 4 bars over and over. The sun made another weak attempt at coming out. And the guard stood there. I found myself watching him more than usual, I suppose because of what I'd seen. I kept sneaking looks between customers, half expecting him to shake his arm out or rub it now that nobody was staring. But he didn't. Whatever he was feeling, he kept it locked up tight where it belonged, and he did his job, which was to stand and to watch and to be there. I didn't know his name that morning. I'll call him what the papers called him after, Private Callum Ray's, 23 years old, from a town up north I'd never heard of till it was printed under his photograph. But right then, to me, he was just the lad on the post, the one who didn't flinch. Around us the morning thickened up. More coaches, more office workers, the pavements filling with that mid-morning crowd, everybody with somewhere to be. A young mum went past pushing a buggy, a baby in a little red hat asleep inside it. I remember the red hat because, well, you'll understand in a minute why I remember the red hat. There was a van parked up the road away. Been there a while, I'd half noticed it. One of those white ones with no writing on the side. Parked a bit odd up on the curb, nose pointing out. I clocked it the way you clock 100 things a day and think nothing of. A badly parked van. London's full of them. The busker started an actual song. People slowed to listen. It was going to be one of those good London mornings, the kind that makes the tourists fall in love with the place. A soldier in red, a man singing, the trees in the park going gold, the smell of coffee. Then the world came apart. I don't have good words for the sound. I've tried. Everybody who was there has tried and nobody gets it right. It wasn't a bang. A bang is what you say afterward because there's no better word. It was more like the air itself got hit, like something enormous and invisible slammed into everything at once, and the sound and the shove arrived in the same instant, so you didn't hear it so much as feel it go through your teeth and your ribs and the bones of your face. The van, it was the van, went up in a ball of gray and orange up the road, maybe 100 yards off. I know that now. In the moment I didn't know anything. In the moment there was just the punch of it, and then my cart was on its side, and I was sitting on the wet pavement with no memory of how I got there, ears screaming a high thin note, tea and paper cups rolling everywhere. Everything went strange and slow and quiet. Not real quiet, my ears were ruined for a bit, but a muffled quiet like the whole world was underwater. I could see people falling. I could see the busker's guitar spin across the ground. I could see the young mum thrown sideways, and the buggy with the red hat in it, tipping, rolling toward the road. And I couldn't move. That's the shameful truth of it. I sat there on the ground like an old fool, ears ringing, watching it all happen, and I couldn't make my body work. Glass was still coming down. Bits of things floating in the air that shouldn't be in the air. Somebody near me was screaming and I couldn't tell who or where. A car alarm started up. Then another. Smoke rolling toward us, low and gray and stinking of chemicals and burning. People do different things in a moment like that. Some run. I saw them run, a whole crowd of them peeling away from the smoke, tripping over each other over the fallen. Some froze, like me. Some just dropped down and covered their heads. It's not cowardice and it's not bravery. It's just what the animal in you decides in a half second before the thinking part has even woken up. And through all of it, through the smoke and the screaming and the alarms, I turned my head slow, everything slow, and I looked back at the post. At the box where the lad had been standing. I don't know what I expected. Him gone, maybe. Him down, him running like the rest. He was still there. That's the image I'll carry to my grave. I want you to see it the way I saw it. Smoke drifting across the whole street, people on the ground, people fleeing. Glass everywhere catching what little light there was. Chaos in every direction, and there in the middle of it, one figure in red still standing at his post. Bearskin cap knocked crooked but still on, rifle in his hands. And he was, I could see it, he was fighting himself. Because he wanted to move. Every man wants to move toward a thing like that or away from it. You could see it in the set of his shoulders, in the way his head was turning, taking it all in, the mum, the buggy, the fallen. Every fiber of him was screaming to break and do something. But he'd been trained his whole soldier's life that the post is the post, that you don't leave it, that the standing is the whole point of you. And there's a horrible loyalty in a man like that. A loyalty that could have kept him frozen at that box while a baby rolled into the road 20 feet away. I watched him stand there for what felt like an hour and was probably a second and a half, torn right down the middle, the uniform saying stand, the man inside it saying go. And then, but that's where I have to stop for now. My hands are shaking a bit just telling it, if I'm honest with you, and the part that comes next is the part that changed everything. The part that stunned every single person who lived through that morning, and a great many who only read about it after. Because what Private Callum Ray's did in the next 90 seconds, after everything, after the arm, after the blast, is the reason I'm sitting here telling you this at all. I'll tell you the rest, I promise I will. Just give me a moment. I left you with him standing there, torn down the middle, the uniform telling him to stay, the man inside telling him to go. Here's what happened. He went. I've thought about that moment more than any other in my whole life, I think. More than my own wedding. More than the day my daughter was born, God forgive me. Because there was a choice in it, and I got to watch a man make it, and the choice told you everything about who he was. He didn't run in a panic. That's the thing I want you to understand. When I say he moved, I don't mean he broke and bolted like the rest of us wanted to. He moved the way you'd move a heavy thing you've decided to lift, all at once, all committed, no half measures. 1 second he was frozen at that box, fighting himself. The next second the fight was over and he'd won it. And he was already 3 strides across the pavement with the rifle held out of the way, and his eyes locked on that buggy rolling toward the road. The buggy, the red hat, the baby. The mum was down. She'd been thrown by the blast and she was trying to get up on all fours, hair over her face, mouth open, screaming, I think, though I couldn't hear her over the ringing in my head. And the buggy had tipped up on 2 wheels and was rolling, slow but rolling, off the curb and out toward where the traffic had been, toward a road where, any second, some panicking driver was going to come tearing through not looking at anything. He got there. I don't know how a man crosses that much ground that fast in a full ceremonial rig, boots and all, but he did. He got a hand on that buggy the instant before it went off the curb properly, hauled it back, spun it round so his own body was between it and the road. And then, and this is the bit that undid me, he didn't just grab the baby and run. He crouched right down over that buggy, put himself over it like a roof, like a shield, and he checked. Checked the little one was breathing, was whole, was there. I could see him doing it. This great lad in red, bent right over, being gentle as anything with those big hands that 90 minutes earlier a bully had tried and failed to crush. The baby, by some miracle, was fine, wailing its head off apparently, though I couldn't hear it, but fine, not a scratch. Later they said the buggy's frame and the way it had tipped had shielded it. I say it was the frame and him. He scooped the whole thing up, buggy, baby, red hat, the lot, and carried it back to the mum. Set it down by her. Got her by the arm and got her up and moved the 2 of them, mother and child, back against the wall, away from the road, away from the smoke, out of the middle of it. And I thought, that's it surely, that's more than enough. That's more than any one man owes anybody. Now he'll stay put, now he'll look after himself. He didn't stay put. He went back out into it. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The smoke was thick by then, low and rolling, and it stank. A chemical burning stink that got right down in your chest. Alarms everywhere. People still on the ground who hadn't got up, and people running who shouldn't have been running because they were leaving the fallen behind. And back out into all that walked the lad in red, cap gone now. He'd lost it or ditched it somewhere, his hair dark and flat with sweat, moving from person to person on the ground. He got to an old fella first, gray chap, older than me even, who'd gone down near the busker and wasn't moving much. The guard crouched, said something to him, got him sitting up against the base of a lamppost. Then he was up and on to the next. A young woman with blood on her face, sitting stunned in the middle of everything, staring at her own hands. He moved her too, back toward the wall, toward the others, building up a little cluster of the hurt and the shocked in the one safest spot he could find, away from the road and the smoke. He was organizing it. That's what I realized, watching. In all that madness, the one clear-headed person in the whole street was the boy everyone had walked past for weeks like he was furniture. He'd flipped some switch in himself, and now he was pointing, directing, waving the runners toward the exits, waving the helpers toward the hurt. Two other blokes, just ordinary blokes, one in a suit, one in high-vis, took his lead and started doing the same, dragging people clear. But it started with him. The current in that street started with him. And here's a small thing I'll never forget. At one point he passed close by my cart, by me sitting there on the wet ground like a sack of potatoes, and he stopped. Half a second, crouched down to my level. His face was right there, young, so young, streaked with grime, a cut over one eyebrow bleeding into it, and he looked me dead in the eye and he said something. I couldn't hear it. My ears were gone, but I could read it off his lips plain as anything. "You all right, sir? Can you move?" "Sir," he called me sir. This lad who just pulled a baby out of the road and was running a rescue single-handed in the middle of a bombing. He stopped for an old coffee seller sitting stunned on the pavement, and he called me sir. And he waited, actually waited, till I got my head together enough to nod. Then he pointed me toward the wall with the others, squeezed my shoulder once, and he was gone again, back into the smoke. I got myself up after that. I'm not proud that it took him to do it, but he did it. Something about a young man treating you with that much care in the middle of hell, it shames you upright. I crawled to my feet and I staggered to the wall and I sat with the others, and from there I watched the rest of it. Sirens now, coming from everywhere and nowhere, the sound bending and warping through my wrecked ears. The first blue lights strobing through the smoke up the road. But the professionals weren't there yet. There's always a gap, isn't there, between the worst happening and the help arriving, and in that gap it's just ordinary people, and whoever among them decides to be more than ordinary. He kept going the whole gap. There was a moment, I have to tell you about this moment. There was a section of scaffolding on a building being done up across the way, and the blast had shaken it, and part of it was hanging, groaning, threatening to come down on the pavement below where two people were still down and not moving. Everyone with sense was staying well clear of it. You could see it was going to go. He went under it, straight under the hanging scaffolding, into the space nobody with any brains would go, and he got a grip on one of the two people down there, a big lad, heavier than him, and he dragged him out from under. Boots scrabbling on the wet ground, both of them, the guard hauling backward with everything he had. Got him clear. Then turned straight round and went back in for the second one, and I swear on everything I love, as he was dragging the second person out, that scaffolding came down. It came down right where they'd been. A great crashing tangle of metal poles and boards, right onto the spot, throwing up dust, and for a horrible second I lost him in it. I thought, that's it, it's got him. The whole wall of us watching let out this sound. A groan. A no. And then the dust thinned and there he was, on his back on the pavement a few feet clear of the wreckage, the second person on top of him where he'd twisted to shield them as they fell. He'd got them out. Both of them. He'd got them out with maybe a second to spare and taken the fall himself so the person he was saving didn't have to. He lay there a moment, just a moment, chest heaving, and then he rolled the other person gently off him, checked them again, always checking, and sat up and looked around for the next thing that needed doing. There wasn't one by then. The blue lights were pushing through. Real help was arriving. Paramedics jumping down, police fanning out, the professionals taking the street off his hands. He'd held the line in the gap. He'd held it till the grown-ups came, if you'll forgive me calling them that. He was younger than all of them and he'd done more. I watched a paramedic go to him. Watched her try to sit him down, look at that cut over his eye, the state of his hands, the arm, the same arm, I'd bet my card on it, the same arm that had been squeezed. He waved her off, kept pointing her at other people. Them first. Them first. She had to more or less order him to sit before he'd let her look at him at all. That's the kind of man he was. Now, I have to tell you the other thing. The thing that closes the circle, the thing that made a lot of us who were there go quiet for a long time after. While all this was happening, the buggy, the old fella, the scaffolding, I clean forgot about the man in the gray tracksuit. Why wouldn't he and his mates had wandered off toward the park a good 10 minutes before the blast? They'd have been well clear of it. In my head, if I thought of him at all, he was long gone, off laughing somewhere, never knowing what happened on that corner after he left. But he wasn't gone. He came back. I saw him come out of the smoke up the road, the big shaved head, the gray tracksuit, unmistakable. Except he didn't look like the same man at all. The swagger was gone. He was moving in that stunned, stumbling way people move after a blast, one arm hanging odd, and there was blood down the side of his face, dark, a lot of it. He'd been closer to the van than his mates when it went, I found out later. Caught the edge of it. His two friends had run. He'd been knocked flat and left where he lay. And by the time he got himself up and moving, the friends who'd laughed at every joke he made were nowhere. He came stumbling down the pavement, this great frightened lump of a man, holding his arm, and he got maybe halfway to the wall where we were sitting, and his legs just went. Folded right under him. He came down hard on the wet stone, and he didn't get up. And people saw him. Of course they saw him. And I'll be honest with you, God forgive me, I saw him go down, and there was a part of me, a low mean part, that thought let him lie there. I'd watched him crush a good man's arm to feel big. I'd watched him call that lad a dummy, a waxwork, half asleep. And here he was, bleeding on the ground, and the low part of me thought, the world's fair after all. I'm not proud of that thought, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't have it. You know who didn't have it. You already know. The guards saw him go down. The paramedic still had a hand on him, still trying to get a look at that eye, and he came up off the curb like it was nothing, like his own body wasn't a mess of cuts and bruises and a half-crushed arm, and he crossed the pavement to where the big man lay. I don't think he recognized him at first. I've wondered about that. Whether when he got there and turned him over and saw the face he knew it, whether it clicked, it's you. The one who put his hand on me, the one who wanted to prove I was nothing. I think he did know, because I saw him go still for a second, kneeling over that man, just a second, the way you go still when something lands. And then he got to work. He turned the big man over, careful of the head, careful of the arm that was hanging wrong. He pressed his own hand to the worst of the bleeding on the side of the man's face, hard, the way you're meant to. He got his other hand under the man's neck and tipped his head back to keep the airway clear. I know now that's what he was doing. I didn't then. I just saw him being gentle and certain with his hands. He shouted for the paramedic, waved her over, this one now. And when she came, he stayed down there with them, holding the pressure, keeping that man alive, until they could get him onto a board and away. The man in the gray tracksuit, the one who'd squeezed his arm to prove he was nothing. That was the man Private Callum Ray's chose to kneel in the wet and the blood and keep breathing. I heard after that the big fellow was conscious for some of it, that his eyes were open. I've wondered 1,000 times whether he knew, whether he looked up from the ground and saw who it was pressing a hand to his wound and keeping his head right, saw the red tunic, filthy now, and the young face over him, and understood that the dummy, the waxwork, the man he tried to break to feel big, was the one person on that whole ruined street who came for him when his own laughing mates had run. I hope he knew, not to shame him. I'm past wanting him shamed. I hope he knew, because a thing like that can turn a man's whole life around if it lands right. I hope, wherever that big frightened fella is now, it landed right. They took him away in the second ambulance. They took the mum and the baby in the red hat away in another, the two of them fine, blessedly fine. They took the old fella, the young woman with the bloodied face, the two from under the scaffolding. One by one, the ambulances filled and pulled away, and the street that had been so ordinary 2 hours before was all tape and lights and grim-faced people in uniform. And the guard. They wanted to take him too. He needed taking, the arm turned out to be properly hurt, and there was the cut, and God knows what else he'd not mentioned. But before they'd let them load him up, before he'd sit down on that board himself, he did one more thing, and it's the last thing I'll tell you in this part because I have to gather myself before the rest. He stood up. Filthy, bleeding, swaying on his feet, arm held against his chest, he stood up straight in the middle of that wreckage. And he turned, and he looked back down the street toward his post, toward the empty box where he was meant to be standing. And for a moment I thought, surely not, surely he's not thinking of going back to it after all this. He wasn't. He couldn't have, even if he'd wanted to, but he looked at it. He looked at the post he'd left, the line he'd broken, the one rule of his soldier's life he'd set aside, and I watched something move across his face that I've never quite been able to name. Not guilt. Not quite. Something more like a question he was asking himself, right there, swaying on his feet. Did I do right? Was it right to leave? And I wanted to shout at him across all that ruin. I wanted to tell him what I'm telling you, that leaving that post was the most right thing I've ever seen a human being do, that the standing still is only worth anything because of what it protects, and when the thing it protects is bleeding in the road, a real man knows the difference. I couldn't shout it. My voice was gone with my hearing, but I like to think he worked it out for himself in the end. That's part two. That's the climax, if you want to call it that, though climax is a strange word for something I lived through with my own 2 eyes. There's more. There's what happened after, what they found out about the man in the gray tracksuit, what the guard said when the papers finally got to him, which wasn't at all what anyone expected. And there's the reason I still can't drink my morning tea without thinking of him. I'll tell you all of it. They let me go home that afternoon, sat me in an ambulance, shone a light in my eyes, told me my hearing would likely come back, and it did mostly over about a week, though to this day if a room goes very quiet I get a faint high note in my right ear, like a kettle 3 houses away. A little souvenir of that morning. I don't mind it really. It's a reminder. I didn't sleep that night. Course I didn't. I sat in my kitchen with the telly on, watching the same footage go round and round. Because somebody had filmed it, hadn't they? That's the world we live in now. Half a dozen phones had caught bits of it, and by the evening the bits were stitched together and playing on every channel there was. And there he was, grainy, shaky, but there. The lad in red carrying a buggy out of the road. The lad in red going under the scaffolding. The lad in red kneeling over a big man in a gray tracksuit, holding a hand to his head, keeping him alive. They didn't have his name yet that first night. The caption just said guardsman hailed as hero after Hyde Park blast. But I knew his face by then better than I knew my own brother's, and I sat there in my kitchen, an old fool with a mug of cold tea going colder, and I cried like a child. For all of it. For the fear and the smoke and the baby that lived and the young man who called me sir. His name came out the next day. Private Callum Ray's, 23. They printed the photograph, a proper one, him in dress uniform, unsmiling, the way they always look in those official shots, from a town up north. His mum did one interview and then asked to be left alone, and they mostly left her alone, which was decent of them for once. The story of the arm came out too, and that's when the whole thing really caught fire, because somebody had filmed that as well, the man ducking under the rope, the circling, the grabbing, the squeezing. And once the 2 clips sat side by side, the whole country saw what I'd seen with my own eyes. The same man, the same arm, squeezed to prove the guard was nothing at 9 in the morning, saved by that same guard with that same arm before 11. People couldn't get over it. I understand why. It's the kind of thing that if you put it in a film, folk would say it was too neat, too much, they'd never believe it. But I was there. It happened just like that. Sometimes life doesn't care whether you'd believe it. They found out about the man in the tracksuit too. His name I'll keep to myself because he's paid enough and I'll not add to it. But the papers dug it up. He wasn't a monster, it turned out. He was just a man. He'd had a hard few years, lost work, lost his dad, drinking more than he should, that kind of ordinary sadness that curdles in some men and comes out as noise and swagger and needing to feel big in front of a soldier who wouldn't flinch. Doesn't excuse what he did. But it explains it a bit. And I've found the older I get the more I want the explaining, even for people I've no reason to forgive. He lived. I should have said that plainly. The man in the gray tracksuit lived. Bad concussion, a broken arm, his own arm this time, the irony of it, and a long cut down his scalp that took a lot of stitches. But he lived. Because a young man he tried to break knelt in the road and kept him breathing. Here's the part that stunned everyone, and I've saved it for last on purpose. About a fortnight after, when Reyes was healed enough, they let one journalist speak to him. Just one, a careful sort, and the interview went out on the television one evening. I watched it, of course. The whole country watched it. They asked him all the questions you'd ask. What was going through his mind? Was he frightened? How he found the nerve to go under the scaffolding? And he answered them plainly, no fuss, a bit uncomfortable with all the attention, the way that kind of man always is. But then the journalist asked him the one everybody was waiting for. She brought up the arm, showed him the clip, the man squeezing him, calling him a waxwork. And she asked gently, but she asked how he felt, saving the very man who'd humiliated him. Whether in that moment, kneeling over him, he'd thought about what the man had done. Whether any part of him had wanted to leave him lying there. And the whole country leaned in, I reckon, because that's the question, isn't it? That's the human question. We'd all had the low, mean thought I'd had. We wanted to know if he had too. He was quiet a moment. Then he said, and I've got it near word for word, because it went round the world and I heard it 100 times after he said, I didn't save him. That's the thing people keep getting wrong. I didn't save him. I just did the next thing that needed doing. He was a person on the ground who was hurt. That's all he was to me by then. I didn't have room to remember the rest. The journalist pushed. Surely, she said, you must have recognized him. And Reyes said, I did. For a second I did. And then I let it go, because a second is all you can afford to spend on a thing like that when someone's bleeding. Holding a grudge and holding a wound, you can't do both with the same hands. You can't do both with the same hands. I've thought about that sentence every day since. A 23-year-old boy said that. Half the wise men I've met in 70 years couldn't have found it, and he found it plain, sitting there uncomfortable in a chair with a healing arm, wanting only to go home. They asked him one more thing, about leaving his post. Whether he'd been in trouble for it because there'd been talk, you know how people talk. Some fool had said online that he'd broken protocol, abandoned his position, that there ought to be consequences. And you could see it touched something in him, because that was the question he'd been asking his own self, wasn't it, swaying in the wreckage that morning. Did I do right to leave? He said the post is there to protect people. When the people are the ones in danger, the post moves. Any soldier worth the uniform knows that. I'd stand at that box 1,000 mornings and take 1,000 idiots squeezing my arm. That's the job, that's easy, you just breathe and you hold. But the box was never the point. The people were always the point. I'd leave it again tomorrow. I'd leave it every time. His commanding officer, it came out later, had said much the same and rather more bluntly to the fool online. No trouble came to Reyes. Quite the opposite in the end. There was a medal, a proper one, and a day of it, and he stood very straight and looked very uncomfortable, and I imagine wished he was anywhere else. But that's a story for another time. Medals aren't really the point either. The man in the gray tracksuit did one more thing, and I'll tell you about it because it's the reason I can end this the way I mean to. Months after, when it had all gone quiet, when the tape was long gone from that corner and the coaches had started coming again and London had done what London always does and moved on, the big man wrote a letter. Not to the papers. He'd had enough of papers by then, I should think. He wrote it to Ray's, through the regiment, and Ray's never said what was in it, and neither did he, and good for both of them. But I know one line of it, because Ray's, in that same interview right at the end, when the journalist asked if the man had ever been in touch, said only this, that he had, and that he wouldn't share what was written except for one part which he thought the man wouldn't mind him sharing, because he thought other people might need to hear it. The line was, "You were the realest thing on that street and I called you fake. I'll spend the rest of my life being sorry and trying to be worth what you did." And Ray said when he'd read that line out, he said the thing I'll leave you with. He said he didn't want the man spending his life being sorry. He said, "I'd rather he spent it being different. Sorry's easy. Different's the hard one. I hope he does the hard one." So, that's the whole of it. That's everything I saw and everything I learned after. I've told it to you as true as I can tell it, an old man's memory and all, but the shape of it is right. I'd swear to that on anything you like. I still run my cart. Different corner now, I couldn't go back to that one for a long while, and by the time I could, the fear had worn off, but a kind of tenderness had grown up in its place, and I found I liked being near it. So I moved a little closer instead of further away. Funny that. You'd think you'd run from the place. Sometimes you lean toward it. And every morning, without fail, I make myself a tea. And every morning it goes cold in my hand, because I forget it's there. I stand and I look down the road toward where a young man in red once stood so still that a bully tried to break him just to feel the crack, and stayed so still that morning that not even a bomb could move him from his post, until a baby needed moving more. He taught me something I was too old to expect to learn, that the strongest thing a person can do isn't to stand and take it, though that's hard and that's rare. And it isn't even to run into the fire, though God knows that's harder and rarer still. The strongest thing, the thing that stunned every one of us who stood on that street, is to look down at the man who tried to break you, the man the whole world would forgive you for leaving in the road, and to kneel, and to hold the wound instead of the grudge. Because you can't do both with the same hands. He said that. A boy of 23, filthy and bleeding on a London pavement, said that with his life before he ever said it with his mouth. My tea's gone cold again. It always does. I don't mind.